Hello and welcome back to Whisky Business. I'm Levi.
I'm Evan.
And today we're going to be taking you on a tour of the Tasmanian Highlands. We've got two wonderful Nant expressions to try, so I'm not going to give it any more fanfare. We're going to get straight into it, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so looking forward to drinking these. So, I'm super excited to be doing two Nants today. Like, one of my favourite whiskey brands. So, what have you brought, Levi?
I brought along the Nant Port Cask. So, from the Nant distillery in the Tasmanian Highlands. I don't think we need to give too much background about Nant, one of the most famous and well-known Australian distilleries that there is. This is a 43% single malt whiskey from, as noted in the name, French oak port casks. It's won a bunch of awards. I think Nant continues to win a bunch of awards. Not going into too much detail about what they all were, but it won a couple of silver awards at the World Spirit Awards, which are very prestigious and very well known. I don't think there's a lot to say about this. I think it's probably just drink it.
I just want to drink it. Cheers. Oh my god, that nose. Just so fruity.
A lot of vanilla.
Really vanilla. Very sweet. Oh my god.
Really dances around your mouth too.
A little bit viscous, but not
A little bit, yeah.
super. You really get a hit of that vanilla straight away.
Yeah.
First thing kind of hits the top of the mouth.
Yep.
First, you get that vanilla, then it kind of finishes down to that.
It does
really
have
nice
a little kick of the spirit in there too. You can definitely taste it. They are alcoholic, but you can definitely taste it. It's got a bit of alcohol in it, but it's not abrasive. It's not harsh.
But we've talked about that before. It's about balancing that fire along with the flavors. So you don't mind that fire because you've also still got your mouth gets kind of coated.
Yeah, you feel it in your mouth, and then I think, as you want with a good whiskey, you want a little bit of a kick in the throat, and you want it to warm up your heart, and you can feel that when you have that. So it's just a beautiful whiskey.
All right. Let's give this a go, shall we?
For sure. You can also see from the port cask, just the colouring. It's a little bit darker. Obviously, port being a darker spirit as well. Sits in the casks, distills down.
Absolutely. A lot more vanilla on the nose. A little bit of spice as well.
A lot more vanilla, but a lot less of everything else too.
Yeah.
It really sort of pushes that to the front.
Do you get that kind of spice as well, or is that just... Yeah.
I think I prefer that without water.
It's almost a different whiskey with the water.
It is.
That fire is a lot more prominent.
Yeah, it kicks out in front. I don't think it... For me, that's the water hasn't really opened up the flavours. It's sort of stifled them quite a bit.
Them. It's really brought that burn front and centre, which isn't a horrible thing, but I definitely prefer it without the water.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a neat drinking whiskey. So Tasmania, for those playing at home that don't know, probably when Australia sort of kicked off with its own whiskey business. Tassie was sort of the first front runner to really kick off. There was Nant, there was Lark, there was...
Well, funny story about that. I found this out when I was in Tassie, is that for the longest time, the reason why was there were laws preventing this distillation of spirits in Australia.
Oh.
Of whiskey specifically. Rums and stuff were fine, because obviously Bundaberg has been huge for years. But Tasmania specifically had these weird, antiquated distillation laws which stopped them. And it took for Bill Lark, owner of Lark Distillery and one of the forerunners for Sullivan's Cove as well, to actually go and go, hey, we'd like to make whiskey. Can we change these laws?
Well, and obviously in Tasmania, the climate is very similar to Scottish climates, which makes sense in terms of the way that they want to distill it and the timing.
But also, because it still has a little bit warmer than Scotland, it means the age expression doesn't matter so much.
We have talked a little bit before on this show about age expressions and that you don't want to be ageist with your whiskies. It's not important. Certainly for some whiskies, for Scottish whiskies especially, the time that they distill and the time and the age profile that the whiskey has can be an important thing.
Yeah.
For a lot of others, it doesn't make a lick of difference.
So, Australia in general, when we look through the autumn, winter, spring in Tasmania, very similar to Scotland. But when you hit summer...
Warmer in summer.
So much warmer so that it really speeds up that angel share, that evaporation process to really give you that good product. But yeah, I agree with you. With the water was
Sorry,
not as good as
have
Nant.
we explained Angel's Share before? I don't know if we
I
have.
don't think we
explained it
have.
on camera before.
Okay.
Do you want to quickly
Sure.
explain Angel's Share?
Angel's Share is how much of the whiskey evaporates from the barrel from when it's first put into the barrel to when it's ready to go. So different countries have different rates of Angel's Share. So I believe... I actually don't know what the general...
You can basically go with the rule of thumb of if it's warmer and more humid, you lose more.
Oh, exactly.
And it's just a cool little term. It's something that you might hear people talk about. You might not know what it was. I certainly had no idea what it was. Probably the first 30 times that I heard it.
Yeah.
And
like Pete.
like Pete, like any of the great whiskey terms.
I was the same. I was exactly the same.
So hopefully we can be a little bit educational.
Why are we talking about Pete? I thought we were talking about smokiness.
It's not my name. I don't understand what we're doing here. Yeah, that's just a really beautiful, again, quite a simple whiskey.
Whiskey.
It's got a couple of flavour profiles. It's not super complex. Yeah. As you said, I think that's a lot better neat.
For me, I think this whiskey is amazing. Whether it's worth investing in a bottle, this is where it gets tricky. This is about 170 or so a bottle for 500. But that's only for 500 ml.
It's a smaller bottle.
It is a smaller bottle, but at the same time, I do like that the new owners of the Nant distillery have decided to go for the smaller bottles to keep the price down.
Yeah, because a bottle of Nant back in the day could be
260, 300.
Yeah, it could really price you out of the market being able to buy it at all. So that's, I think from a price point of view, you can get bigger and better bottles. I think if you are a whiskey aficionado, if you do like to collect and you do like to drink good whiskies, Nant's, if not the best, certainly one of the best.
It's definitely one of the best.
Top three Australian whiskies.
It's always been award-winning.
It competes with anything in the world, I think.
The most unfortunate thing about Nant changing ownership, which we might touch on more when we're reviewing the next whiskey, is that they also made great whiskey bars.
They did. One of our favourite places in the CBD of Melbourne was the Nant Underground Whiskey Bar, which is no longer there. I think it's a cocktail bar of another description.
It's a new cocktail bar, but they also had whiskey bars in Tassie, in Sydney, and in Brisbane as well.
Sydney, yes. I forgot about the Sydney one.
So they had a few, and they made really, really great whiskey bars that were very open and very
I think they gave a really good mix of that really old world whiskey charm with the big leather sofas and the fireplace and the smoking jackets and the booths.
They had great booths.
But they would also have wonderful, knowledgeable people that could explain to you, and were very happy to explain to you. It's certainly somewhere where I learnt a lot about whiskey.
And good menus that actually set out.
And complimentary foods and all that sort of stuff that you want when you do want to have good whiskey and expensive whiskies as well, because they're not cheap. There's no getting around that. They don't have those anymore. There are still plenty of good ones in Melbourne that do very similar things, but I in my opinion, Nant was the creme de la creme of that.
Absolutely. So, in terms of rating this is really hard.
It's really hard because it's a very, very good whiskey. It is a very expensive whiskey.
It's a very expensive
there's no getting around that. I think for me,
I don't want to give it a 10. I want to give it a 10, but I also don't want to give it a 10.
I'm honestly, I'm going a bit lower. I'm thinking it's more a 7 and 8.
Really?
It's very, very good, but for $160, comparing it to other things that you can get around that mark, and even some things that sit underneath.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
It's a wonderful flavour profile. It is a really, really lovely whiskey, but for that price point, I think there's better. I think that I'm not, by no means am I denigrating Nant, a wonderful distillery, and that is a wonderful whiskey.
Yeah.
I think an 8. It is a very good whiskey.
I think I'm going to go 9.
That's fair.
I think as much as, yes, there is better stuff in the price point, it's still such a nice whiskey, and it's something that's going to sit on your shelf, that's going to look really good.
It's true.
And that you are going to enjoy drinking.
And you have to acknowledge that with Nant, with the Australian distilleries, there is a romance to being able to drink local, and we've met people that were involved with the Nant distillery, very high up people. We've met people involved in a number of the Australian distilleries. You can't separate that whole experience of understanding the whiskey from go to woe, from being able to see it develop as a brand, from being able to have some of their first expressions, which I think you may have had. I certainly haven't. That's a whole story that I think paints a picture.
And we've had that with other distilleries as well, places like Iniquity and Starwood, where we've seen them come up and been able to try them along the way to where they are now.
Yeah.
But I think Nant is one of those ones where, it's just, for me, that brand has always been the epitome of Australian whiskey, because
definitely,
I think I lived in Tasmania for a little while, and one of the great things that Tassie does is they love to support local products.
They embrace it so much.
Every bar you would walk into would have a bottle of this stuff on the shelf. So I was able to really get familiar with all of their expressions. And so when I found out Nant closed down and they got bought by different owners, I was so excited. And when we saw them at Whisky Live earlier this year...
It was a real moment for the two of us.
It was really great. But I think... Yes, there are better whiskies in that price point. I think there's just a lot of love for me for that.
It's
brand.
hard to be subjective with a brand like Nant,
Yeah.
but it's a great whiskey. I wouldn't have a problem with anyone giving it a 10. To be honest,
Absolutely.
It is a beautiful whiskey.
But yeah, I would say if you're willing to invest, worth doing, buy a glass first.
Have a glass, definitely go somewhere. Nant is available at any of the good whiskey bars.
Absolutely.
If you go to a whiskey bar and it doesn't stock Nant, it probably says more about the whiskey bar than it does about Nant.
If you're in Australia, you're going to find it everywhere. If you're overseas, you really need to make sure you're going to a proper whiskey bar.
I think a couple of the bars that we went to in Japan had Nant,
really?
amazingly.
There you go.
It's got a global reputation. It's won a lot of awards. It is very, very good. And they don't rest on their laurels. They understand that they have a name and a brand, but they also understand that they are as good as the last thing they put out. So they continue to put out good stuff.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
Let's do it. So I know that you've been particularly excited about Nant Day here at Whisky Business. So what have you brought along for us?
So I brought the Bourbon Cask. To give you guys some idea, we actually bought these at exactly the same time.
We did. We were very excited.
I went into a random bottle shop that I barely ever went into, and we found both of these like a good 10, 20 bucks off. I messaged Levi straight away and I just bought both of them on the spot.
Then we had a fist fight about which one we got to keep, and then we went, what does it really matter? We drink whiskey together anyway. It's not going to make a difference.
So I'm really looking forward to this one. This is the Bourbon Cask. So it's a 43% whiskey like the Port Cask. They tend to keep their alcohol content very similar across the standard expressions. This is done in American oak bourbon casks. Very standard for a bourbon whiskey. But what's really surprising for us is how light the colour of this is. It's just
for comparison,
like if we go next to the
Port Cask.
Next to the Port Cask, it's just, it looks like liquid gold, which I am really hoping translates to the
beautiful colour.
Really hoping translates to the taste. Like the Port Cask, this thing has won a ridiculous amount of awards. It won double gold at China Wine and Spirits, silver at Australian Distilled Spirits, and gold at the Women's Wine and Spirits. So Nant are doing a really great job of coming back. For those that don't know, Nant came around a few years back, probably about, I want to say 6 or 7 years back.
Yeah, I would have said around 2010, 2011, maybe a little bit after that.
Maybe a little bit after. Came up really quickly, had a big name.
Yeah, went really exploded on the scene.
Yeah, really exploded on the scene.
As we were saying earlier, they opened a couple of really good bars, which I think got their name out there, and they had really good product.
But something went wrong in the administration. We're not sure if it was meant to crash as a tax write-off or if they just went too big too fast and couldn't keep up. So the brand actually kind of died a couple of years back, which is a little bit sad.
I think we had this conversation at the time. It did seem for Nant as though they really sort of went gangbusters. Their price points skyrocketed from when they first started, literally sort of double and triple prices in this space of 6 months.
Yeah.
And it did sort of seem that a lot of their sort of loyal followers, the people that enjoyed Nant, kind of went, this is actually pricing out now and we can't afford to buy it. And they just sort of stopped selling. And certainly no reflection whatsoever on the product. The product was fantastic. I think it just... the way that the brand evolved didn't quite match the way that the price points evolved. That's what it seemed like to me.
But there's a lot of rumours around what happened.
A lot of rumour, a lot of innuendo.
But we were really happy to find it was bought by new owners, that they wanted to keep the same brand name, keep the same quality and sort of stuff like that.
Yep.
And so...
same distillery as well, I think, right smack bang in the middle of the island in Tassie, so it's getting great climates. It's in a beautiful place. It's,
But let's continue this conversation later because I really want to try this.
You're dying to, aren't you?
Absolutely. Oh.
It smells really sweet.
Yeah.
Quite light too.
Very light. There's actually not a lot to the nose. Oh, you get kind of a toasted caramel right down the bottom there.
That's legitimately delicious. It has no right to have that much flavour being that light. It looks like the sort of thing that you're going to drink and really not get a lot from, and then it first sort of hits your lips and opens up in your mouth, and it just tastes fantastic. It's got
it fills the mouth, and not like the Hibiki, which was from a viscosity point of view. This is just the amount of flavor that comes out.
Yeah, exactly right.
You get that lovely amount of heat. You get that kind of toasted, almost a toasted caramel flavor as well.
Quite sweet, yeah. It's definitely got some caramelized notes. It's still got just a little bit of pepper on it, just a touch, not a huge amount of spice, but it is quite sweet. But it's also still got a nice amount of complexity. The heat comes on very, very gradually and very, very smoothly as well. Kind of
hits different parts of the mouth, the heat as well.
Yeah.
It does tip of the tongue, top of the mouth, and almost sides and back of tongue. So it feels like it's really filling the entire mouth. I almost don't want to do this.
We've got to do it.
But we've got to do it.
We've got to process. We've got to stick to our process. I think it's fair to say that straight off the bat, the expectation is this one's probably not necessarily going to be enhanced by the water, especially given the way that the port cask reacted with the water.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll find out.
Absolutely. Cheers.
It's got even less on the nose now. You can almost barely smell it.
Still toasted down the bottom though.
Still very sweet.
Yeah.
Almost sweeter, but just, not a lot on it. That's still pretty good.
That's still good.
Yeah.
I think I still prefer it without the water.
I think it is still definitely a whiskey to be had neat. But yeah, it's not losing a lot from having the water in it.
Not like the port cask.
No, and you expect the water at any point to really sort of open up the flavours. Certainly with the port cask, I don't really think it did that. It diluted them. It doesn't dilute. The bourbon cask doesn't dilute the same way the port cask did, but you're not getting that same sort of fullness. I don't think that richness. That
I think my bigger problem with putting water in this is less to do with what it's going to do with the flavors, more so that it dilutes that gorgeous color.
Well, yeah, that as well. It's certainly not quite as
golden.
It almost looks like apple juice in the bottle. That really is just a fantastic whiskey.
It is. Oh my god.
I think that one beats the port cask.
Yeah, which is surprising because like when I found both of these, you went for the port straight away.
I did. Well, I generally prefer a port cask.
Yeah. I agree with you. Like, I think our history has always been to go for the slightly odd cask. Like, we love a sherry cask, we love a wine cask. Bourbon cask for us is kind of,
it's a little bit more normal, and it's not something that you've never heard of before.
But they've done such an amazing job.
I think the first couple of times that you and I had sherry casks, I think you'd had them before. I probably hadn't had them before, and for me, it was a real sort of a new experience. It was something totally different, and the way that the flavors mix and the way that the color comes out, all of it just is different. And I enjoyed it.
I know my favorite cask is always wine. I love a good wine cask. In fact, one of my absolute top whiskies of all time is from Nant, and you can't get it anymore, but they did a Pinot Noir cask, which was
I had that with you.
Oh my god.
It was fantastic.
Like, it just had this, it really took on the flavour of
really
Pinot
bold.
Noir,
very, very bold.
but still had wonderful balance and all that other sort of stuff. Once again, I don't think you need to add water to this.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think it ruins it.
No, it doesn't ruin it. I definitely don't think that it enhances in any way the port cask. I don't think you lose anything from the water in this. If you are the type of person like me that generally drinks on the rocks, I think that's fine on the rocks.
Because you'll get that slower release.
You get the slower release. And cooling it down, I just like cold drinks. So for me, that's a preference. I think that the port cask on the rocks, I don't think is very good at all.
Maybe that's one you get whiskey stones for. Or just chill your glass beforehand.
I'm not. If you've ever watched our show, you know how I feel about whiskey stones.
One day we're just going to do one episode where all we do is bitch about whiskey stones.
We'll have like 5 minutes of accessories and then 25 minutes of us telling you why you should never drink the whiskey stones. But at the same time, don't listen to us. If you like whiskey stones and they work for you, by all means, go nuts.
So I'm doing it. I'm giving that a 10.
That's a 10.
That's a 10 for me.
It's the first one.
I know.
Third episode of Whisky Live, and
we've only done 6 whiskeys.
We're going high. Yeah, but 6 whiskeys. That's a 10.
That's a 10.
It's a 9 for me.
It's a 9 for you. Still high.
It's a great whiskey. It's a fantastic.
Once again, like we talked about in the port cask, like when you look at that price point, yes, there's better whiskies, but for me, in that price point, I think I'm going to struggle to find something that I enjoy drinking more.
Well, I think that's the key as well, is it's what you enjoy. And we both enjoy Nant. We both enjoy... There's a lot of memories and nostalgia, as you talked about with the Nant stuff.
Absolutely.
That is a fantastic whiskey. It is... Was it $5 cheaper on sale? Not
that
that particularly matters, but...
Yeah. $5 cheaper, but for that lovely colour, that lovely taste. With both of these... no mixing, no cocktails, no nothing. Like,
No, they're not. They don't lend themselves to that.
But don't. It's like,
I think to be a very, very quick story, when I first started drinking whiskey, very young man, not really knowing my thing, I was drinking a lot of whiskey sours. I went to a bar, I got asked what whiskey I wanted in my whiskey sour. I had no idea. I saw a 16-year-old Lagavulin and went, I've had that and I'm sure that that's fine. I got my cocktail and it was $45. So
Yeah.
that is probably going to wind up being the same thing, and it's just not something you have in a cocktail. You can get cheaper, easier drinking, simpler whiskeys for a cocktail. That's not what they're designed for. These are designed to be drunk.
Once again,
neat or on the rocks.
this is a treat. It really, both of them for me are one of those whiskeys that you have as a treat to celebrate.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
These are not, just because of the flavour profiles, because of the heat, because of the way that they are, this is not something that you are just going to pull out on a random Thursday night when you decide you want to.
It's not something you want to go through quickly.
No, not because of the price point and because of the flavour profiles and all of it, really. It's just
honest,
not that kind of whiskey.
It's also something you want to have sitting on your shelf for as long as possible.
Yeah.
It's a nice looking bottle. It's a gorgeous colour. Even this one, like even the... We've talked a lot about the colour, but even the colour of the port cask is absolutely gorgeous with that kind of amber...
The simple bottles,
yeah.
the indent on the bottom of the bottle, all of it, Nant just does everything very refined.
And the stopper.
The cork itself, they're fantastic.
Gorgeous. I think if you're going to... I mean, we'll talk maybe more about this in the outro, which one we would go over the other. But if you want to do this, once again, head to a whiskey bar. Like, just give it a go. It's one of those things. It's probably going to be more expensive than other whiskeys per glass.
It's a $25
Yeah.
$25 glass of whiskey.
But it's not something you should worry about. It's just such
Well,
a
and
nice
it's also,
whiskey.
we've talked about this before. If you're going to a bar, even if it's not a whiskey bar, and you're going drinking with some of your friends, they can get a beer. They'll down their beer in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You could sit on that for an hour quite
Absolutely.
comfortably and enjoy it immensely.
Especially if you have it, if you order it neat. It's something that's going to stay consistent for as long as you drink it.
Absolutely.
If you order on the rocks, it is going to change as you drink.
Yes, as the ice starts to melt, you get more water into it. It does change the flavour profiles and the way that you do drink it.
And for these ones, we would probably recommend not really diluting it in any way. It's not horrible, but I would rather have it neat and have that same sip every single time.
Yeah, the consistency is going to help. I agree.
But yeah, so that's my first 10. I already know what Levi's first 10 is going to be.
Oh, I don't even know what my first 10 is.
Oh, it's going to be the Octomore, mate.
Oh, actually, yeah, that's a good point. I'll be the only person in the world that gives it a 10, but it's a 10 for me.
We'll get that. We'll eventually do some PD episodes, which will suit Levi just fine. But for right now, look, I think that bourbon cask is absolutely gorgeous, colour-wise, flavour-wise, nose-wise. If you're willing to spend the 150, 170 on a bottle, go for it. It's not something you're going to regret.
Absolutely.
But if I would recommend trying it before you spend that money on a bottle. Like, I think this is the advice we will always give. I don't think there's ever a place where you would buy a bottle before you go out and try it for yourself.
I think we our last episode, obviously, we did some price conscious whiskies.
Yeah.
I think that sort of stuff, maybe you'd consider it, but generally speaking, especially if you're talking about $100, it's an investment. It's not something that everybody just has lying around. And if you can try it beforehand, you may as well. I think Evan's right. And I completely agree. I think if you want to try it, if you're interested in understanding what Nant does, and Nant is different to a lot of other whiskies, I think it'd be fair to say. It's definitely go and try a glass before you buy a bottle, but you're not going to go wrong if you do buy a bottle. But it is, as we said, it is a different sort of thing. So it could be the sort of thing that you try, and we are advocates for this. We don't believe in tasting notes. We don't really believe in what reputational things stand for. If you like it or you don't like it, that's the most important thing. And this is different, and you may not like it, but for us, it has a lot of nostalgia. It's got a history. It's got a story, and they are just beautiful whiskies that are beautifully presented and wonderful to drink.
Yeah. All right, so we just really enjoyed that because we got to drink some Nant. I think it's really hard to do a proper sum up on these two because, for one, they are in the more expensive range, so it's not like I could say go out and buy one over the other. I think both of them are worth going out and tasting. You know, maybe not in the same session, maybe spread them out. If we were going to recommend you go out and try one first, I'd have to go with the bourbon cask.
No, I'd agree. And this is coming from a man that generally prefers a sherry or a porter or
Well,
wine cask.
I much prefer a sherry cask, a wine cask, a port cask or something like that. But that bourbon cask just had lovely complexity, but was still just a nice, simple drinking whiskey. And funnily enough, a little bit cheaper than the port cask.
Yeah, not a huge amount when you're talking about $5 and it's up around the $160 mark. It's not really breaking the bank either way, but it was just a preferable whiskey. They're both great. As we said, Nant is very different. It does very different things. Yeah. So you do want to make sure that you try it to make sure that it is your sort of thing before you probably buy a bottle.
I think in general, our main advice that you're probably going to get from every episode is go find a local whiskey bar and really get used to what they have, get to know the people behind the bar, because that's how you're going to find new things, and that's how you're going to find what works for you.
Especially at a whiskey bar, the people that work there usually, generally speaking, love whiskey, and they're going to know it better than we will, better than you will, and they get different samples, they speak to different reps, they understand what's happening in the market, and they understand what's being done, so they can give you really good advice, and they can steer you in the right direction.
And the only way you're going to find what suits you is by trying more whiskey. Like, that's it.
We're 10 years and 12, 13 years worth of experience, and we still don't know it all, but we enjoy trying different stuff. We may at some stage go back to the very first whiskies that we had just to see how much our palates have changed. About that,
but I really am really hesitant about drinking Johnny Walker Black again.
We're going to have to build up to it, that's for sure.
I think so. I think overall, you're not going to lose anything by trying either one of them. Just please go out, find a bar, give them a go. If you're willing to spend the money on a bottle, go for the bourbon cask.
And on top of all of that, support Australian whiskies. There's plenty of incredible Australian distilleries that are doing wonderful things. There's some in Perth, there's some in Melbourne, there's some in Tassie. I've been told by a mate of mine that there's some opening up in New South Wales. That's about to go gangbusters as well.
I have a lovely Western Australian whiskey sitting at home that we'll hopefully do in a future episode as well.
And we will also do an episode on South Australian whiskies, which you absolutely adore.
I love South Australian whiskies.
Support the Australian whiskey industry. They're doing incredible things. And much like when Japan really took off, the more support that we give it, the better that they're going to do, the more they're going to push themselves, and the better the product's going to be for us as a consumer.
But also, if you live somewhere else in the world, support your local whiskies.
Absolutely.
Like, you're gonna, we've tried whiskies from so many different countries, and we found some amazing ones, we found some not so great ones, but the only way everyone's going to get better is if they have that support, if they have that community to try and do better.
And as we've found, when you do try whiskies from all over the place, and we've tried Korean whiskies, we've tried Japanese whiskies, we've probably tried Scottish, Irish, you name it, we've probably had it. New Zealand, amazing stuff. Australia, they all do very different things, and they are all very different. Much like wine, much like all of the great spirits, when you go to the different regions, the way that the climate, the location, all of that sort of stuff ties into the way that these things are distilled down and actually bottled. It makes them different. It makes them really interesting as well. So try different stuff. As you said, Tassie, it's got a very particular brand, Tasmania, as a whiskey location. And Nant is, in my opinion, at the top of the tree down there. So it's fantastic. Just try more whiskey. We're all about it.
But speaking of trying whiskies from other countries...
Yes, we are moving you to the subcontinent. We're taking you across to India. We're going to try some wonderful Indian whiskies. Some of you out there might turn your nose up. I know that when we first saw, I'm not going to name it because I think that it needs to be revealed in the next episode, but when we tried our first Indian whiskey at a whiskey event a couple of years ago, it absolutely stole the show.
Oh, yeah.
Blew the socks off the competition. Possibly because our expectations were a little bit lowered, because we were probably sitting in that same basket of maybe being a little bit snobby and understanding where whiskies come from. But trust me, we are going to try two incredible Indian whiskies. You guys are going to absolutely love it. Not nearly as much as us because we're the ones drinking it, but we look forward to bringing that to you next time.
Sure. So we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear from you guys. Love to hear what whiskies you guys enjoy, because we loved finding new stuff as well. Like, at the end of the day, we're doing this because we want to try new things. So if there's one, we would love to have a conversation with you about whether we've had it or whether we'd love to try it as well. So please, we'd love your feedback. Leave it for us. Other than that, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
And don't forget to keep your business whiskey. Thanks, guys.